Chapter 1: The Invisible Enemy. Welcome to Synapse Daily. Imagine a room filled with blue light. This light is called Cherenkov radiation. It glows inside deep water pools. It is beautiful, but it is lethal. In 1962, the world lived in fear. Nuclear power was the new frontier. It promised endless energy for everyone. But it hid a dark, silent secret. Humans are fragile biological beings. Our cells cannot withstand high energy. Radiation tears through human DNA quickly. It acts like tiny, invisible bullets. These bullets shred our very blueprint. Scientists saw the danger early on. They watched brave men grow very ill. Lead walls were not always enough. Distance was the only real safety. But machines require constant human touch. Valves stuck and pipes leaked often. A human repairman was a dead man. The air grew thick with silent poison. We needed a shield between us. We needed hands made of cold steel. This was the birth of robotics. DARPA stepped into the radioactive glow. They gathered the greatest minds available. General Electric joined the secret mission. They looked at the glowing reactor cores. They saw a gap in human capability. The mission was simple but impossible. Build a worker that never dies. Build a soldier for the atomic zone. This machine must ignore the poison. It must operate where hearts stop. It must see through the haze. The project was draped in shadows. Code names filled the dusty filing cabinets. Engineers drafted plans on giant papers. Every line represented a new hope. Could metal mimic the human hand? Could a machine think under pressure? The invisible enemy was waiting. The clock was ticking toward disaster. We were racing against a meltdown. The stage was set for a titan. A titan born from fire and logic. The era of flesh was ending. The era of the robot began. Chapter 2: The Giant in the Hangar. The Beetle was a mechanical monster. It stood nearly 20 feet tall. The chassis weighed 85 tons. It looked like a prehistoric insect. Its body was a block of steel. The paint was a dull, industrial gray. Heavy treads sat beneath the massive hull. These tracks were from an M42 tank. They were built for rugged battlefields. Now, they carried a nuclear surgeon. Engineers stood in awe of its size. This was not a nimble machine. It was a rolling fortress of science. The ground shook when it moved. The engine roared with immense power. It burned fuel like a hungry beast. Every bolt was checked 10 times. The hydraulic lines were thick as snakes. They carried the lifeblood of the giant. This blood was high-pressure oil. The Beetle was designed for wrecks. Specifically, nuclear aircraft engine wrecks. America wanted atomic planes in 1962. These planes would never need refueling. But their engines were incredibly hot. No human could stand near them. The Beetle was the only solution. It would roll into the crash site. It would lift the burning debris. It was a wall against the light. Its armor was 1 foot thick. This was pure lead and steel. No ray could pierce that skin. The design was brutal and honest. It did not value beauty. It only valued survival and strength. In the hangar, it looked alien. It looked like a visitor from Mars. But it was made in Ohio. It was a product of American fear. It was a monument to protection. The Titan was ready for work. The metal insect waited for life. Chapter 3: The Pilot's Iron Coffin. The cockpit was a tiny, cramped space. The pilot climbed in from the top. He entered a world of buttons. The seat was hard and narrow. He sat behind thick lead glass. This glass was 2 feet deep. It looked like frozen yellow honey. It weighed several tons by itself. Through it, the world looked distorted. The pilot felt completely alone inside. Air was pumped in through filters. The machine breathed for the man. The heat inside was nearly unbearable. Electronics generated waves of warm air. The cooling system struggled to keep up. Sweat stung the pilot's focused eyes. He wore a headset for communication. Voices from outside sounded very distant. He controlled the arms with levers. His feet worked the heavy pedals. Every movement required extreme precision. One wrong nudge could crush a pipe. A crushed pipe meant a radiation leak. The pilot lived in a metal bubble. His life depended on hydraulic fluid. If a seal broke, he trapped. He would be stuck in the zone. The lead glass was his only window. He watched the mechanical arms move. They were his new, stronger limbs. He was the brain of the beast. But he felt like a prisoner. The Iron Coffin was a fitting name. It protected him from the invisible fire. But it stole his sense of touch. He felt the vibrations through the floor. He smelled the scent of hot oil. He heard the hum of the pumps. This was a lonely, dangerous job. The pilot was a pioneer of isolation. He was the ghost in the machine. Chapter 4: The Hands of God. The Beetle had two massive arms. They were called General Mills manipulators. Yes, the cereal company built them. They were masters of mechanical engineering. The arms were long and silver. They had multiple joints like humans. They could reach high and low. They could lift several hundred pounds. Yet, they could also pick up eggs. This precision was a miracle of 1962. Engineers spent years perfecting the grip. The fingers were tipped with rubber. The rubber provided a soft touch. The arms moved with a high-pitched whine. The sound echoed in the test labs. The mechanics were purely analog systems. No microchips existed in these arms. It was all gears and pressure. Steel fingers dancing in a death zone. They could turn a tiny screw. They could pull a heavy lever. The pilot felt the resistance in levers. This was early force feedback technology. It allowed him to feel the object. He could tell if a bolt snapped. He could tell if a wire stretched. This was the Hands of God project. Man's will, executed by cold steel. The arms never grew tired or shaky. They did not fear the glowing core. They were extensions of human intent. Scientists watched through the thick glass. They saw the arms lift a wrench. The wrench turned with perfect grace. It was a ballet of heavy industry. The world had never seen this. We were mimicking life with metal. We were mastering the art of distance. The hands reached into the void. They did the work of the brave. Chapter 5: The Project Pluto Nightmare. Why did we need these robots? The answer lies in Project Pluto. This was a nuclear-powered cruise missile. It was a weapon of total war. It would fly low and fast. The engine was an open nuclear reactor. It did not have a heavy shield. A shield would be too heavy. The missile left a trail of radiation. It poisoned the ground it flew over. The engine air was a radioactive torch. It was a terrifying, screaming nightmare. Humans could never touch the engine. Maintenance was a death sentence for men. The Beetle was built for this fire. It would approach the glowing reactor. It would perform surgery on the core. The project was terrifying and bold. America wanted a flying crowbar. The missile would never stop flying. It would circle the globe for weeks. The Beetle was its only mechanic. Imagine the scene in the desert. The missile lands in a secure bay. The ground is hot and glowing. The Beetle rolls out of its hangar. The 80-ton giant meets the missile. It uses its hands to pull rods. It replaces parts while they sizzle. The robots were the silent janitors. They cleaned the messes of gods. Without the Beetle, Pluto was impossible. The robot made the nightmare manageable. It turned a weapon into a machine. It was a dance with the apocalypse. The engineers watched with held breath. The Beetle was the final piece. It was the key to the door. A door we almost opened wide. It was a world of pure radiation. The Beetle stood as the only witness. Chapter 6: The Sound of the Void. Radioactivity makes a specific sound. In sensors, it sounds like static. It is a constant, aggressive hiss. The robot sensors recorded this noise. The Beetle worked in total silence. Only the hum of electric motors remained. Cameras were primitive in those days. They were black and white tubes. The image was grainy and shaky. Static lines danced across the screen. The pilot saw a ghost world. He worked through a flickering lens. Depth perception was a constant struggle. Is the wrench 1 inch away? Or is it 1 foot away? Every movement was a calculated gamble. One mistake could cause a spark. The silence was heavy and thick. The pilot heard his own heartbeat. Outside, the air was ionized. The atoms were literally tearing apart. The robot felt the invisible pressure. Metal grew warm from the gamma rays. The pilot felt the machine's stress. He moved the heavy arms with care. The screen was his only reality. It was a digital window to hell. The world outside was a blur. Only the task mattered in the void. The machine was the pilot's body. The wires were his nervous system. They felt the static of the abyss. Chapter 7: Failure is a lesson. Not every test was a success. Engineering is a path of broken parts. Hydraulic lines often burst under pressure. The red fluid looked like blood. It sprayed against the lead glass. The pilot's vision would turn red. The Beetle would freeze in place. A frozen robot is a liability. It becomes a radioactive monument forever. You cannot just walk to it. Teams had to recover the machine remotely. They used long cables and winches. Each failure taught a vital lesson. Radiation degrades certain types of seals. It turns rubber into brittle glass. The atoms changed the material's soul. The engineers had to invent new plastics. The struggle was against physics itself. Grease would turn into hard wax. Electric wires would simply melt away. The Beetle was a laboratory on tracks. Every broken gear was a data point. We learned how to build for eternity. We learned what the atom destroys. Failure was the only path forward. The desert was full of broken steel. But the mines grew sharper each day. The machine evolved through its wounds. Chapter 8: The Shadow of DARPA. DARPA operates in the deep future. They think decades ahead of others. In 1962, they saw 2026 clearly. They knew robots would rule industry. The Beetle was an expensive prototype. It cost millions of taxpayer dollars. Some politicians called it a toy. They saw a giant, slow tank. They did not see the potential. DARPA ignored the vocal critics. They focused on the mechanical soul. They pushed the limits of remote sensing. How does a man feel through steel? How do we bridge the gap? DARPA found the first cold answers. They studied the human-machine interface. They looked at feedback loops and lag. The shadow of DARPA was long. It covered every secret nuclear site. They were the architects of the unusual. They built things no one else dared. The Beetle was their crown jewel. It was a heavy, lead-line dream. It proved that distance equals safety. It proved that machines can replace skin. The shadow was a guiding light. Chapter 9: The Ghost of Idaho Falls. The testing happened in the desert. Idaho Falls held the secret labs. The wind howled across the plains. The land was flat and gray. Inside the hangars, history was made. The SL-1 reactor had exploded there. 3 men died in that tragedy. Their bodies were pinned to the ceiling. The site was a radioactive graveyard. The Beetle was the response to grief. We would never send men again. We would send the steel ghost. The desert sand hid the secrets. The machines moved through the dust. They looked like aliens in the sun. They were the children of trauma. They carried the weight of the fallen. The Beetle explored the ruins of SL-1. It touched the metal that killed men. It did not feel the pain. It did not feel the fear. The ghost walked where humans failed. It was a sentinel of the sagebrush. The tracks left deep scars in sand. Those scars told a story of survival. The desert remembers the giant's step. The ghost still haunts the archives. Chapter 10: The Evolution of the Arm. The Beetle was just the beginning. After the Beetle came the PAR. These were lighter, more agile arms. They were mounted on ceiling rails. They moved like mechanical spiders now. They could navigate complex pipe networks. The heavy armor was not always needed. Speed became the new design goal. If you are fast, radiation hits less. The 1960s was a decade of growth. We moved from tanks to spiders. The technology was shrinking and refining. The foundations of modern haptics began here. Engineers studied the feedback of pressure. How much force can a motor apply? Can we feel a needle's tip? These questions drove the next generation. Miniaturization was the new secret weapon. Hydraulic oil was replaced by electricity. Electric motors were more precise and clean. They did not leak red fluid everywhere. The arms grew smaller and more efficient. They began to look like human limbs. DARPA watched the progress with pride. The PAR system entered many plants. It became the standard for safety. Every nuclear facility wanted these hands. They could reach into the core's heart. They could fix what was once broken. The evolution was rapid and bold. We were leaving the heavy tanks behind. We were entering the age of precision. The spider replaced the heavy beetle. But the beetle's soul remained inside. It was the father of every grip. The evolution of the arm was unstoppable. Chapter 11: Impact on the Space Race. NASA watched DARPA very closely then. The Cold War had 2 main fronts. One was nuclear, the other was space. Both environments were incredibly hostile. If a robot works in radiation, why? Because space is full of radiation too. Cosmic rays are silent, deadly hunters. The Beetle's arms influenced lunar designs. The Surveyor probes used similar logic. Remote control was the key to Mars. The 1962 program was a rehearsal. It was a rehearsal for the stars. We learned how to build for vacuums. We learned how to build for heat. The nuclear lab was our moon. The robot was our first astronaut. The lessons of Idaho moved to Florida. NASA engineers studied the Beetle's joints. They needed lightweight versions of those arms. Weight is the enemy of every rocket. But strength is a basic necessity. The balance was found in DARPA's files. The moon landing used these early concepts. The lunar rover had simple robotic parts. They were cousins of the nuclear giants. Even today, Mars rovers use manipulators. They trace their lineage to 1962. The Beetle never left the Earth's soil. But its design logic reached the stars. It was a bridge to the galaxy. We practiced survival in a lead box. Then we applied it to the cosmos. The impact was profound and lasting. The space race was a robotic race. Chapter 12: The Legacy of Lead. Where is the Beetle today? It sits in a museum of shadows. Most of it was scrapped for parts. The lead was recycled for other shields. The steel was melted and reused again. But the blueprints still exist today. Modern robots owe it a debt. The Boston Dynamics machines are descendants. They are the Beetle's many grandchildren. We no longer use 80-ton tanks. We use nimble, smart, autonomous drones. But the courage started in 1962. The era of the machine began. The legacy of LEAD is safety. It is the history of human protection. We learned that machines can be heroes. They can take the blow for us. They can stand in the blue light. The Beetle proved the concept was real. Remote work is now a global reality. Doctors use robots for surgery today. They use the same master-slave logic. The pilot controls, the machine acts. This was perfected in the 1960s labs. The heavy metal is mostly gone now. But the digital ghost remains very strong. It lives in every remote-controlled claw. It lives in every deep-sea explorer. The legacy is a safer, smarter world. The giant is dead, but it lives. Chapter 13, The Final Lesson. The atomic age changed our species. We created power we cannot touch. We built steel hands to hold fire. The 1962 DARPA program was vital. It was a moment of pure ingenuity. It proved that humans can adapt. We use tools to survive the impossible. History is a circle of innovation. From the Beetle to the Mars rover. We reach where our bodies cannot. This is the essence of being human. We build extensions for our limited flesh. The 1962 robots were our first shields. They showed us the way through darkness. The final lesson is one of hope. Technology can protect life, not just destroy. The Beetle was built for a nightmare. But it created a dream of exploration. It turned fear into a functional tool. Thank you for joining Synapse Daily. We hope you enjoyed this mechanical tale. Explore the world through our eyes. The future is built on old steel. The past is a roadmap for tomorrow. Keep looking for the hidden stories. The truth is often heavier than lead. The light is always worth the risk. Goodbye for now, stay curious. Stay focused on the silent gears. The machine is waiting for your command. End of transmission.